Prime Minister Narendra Modi had a telephonic conversation today with the President of Russia, Vladimir Putin. President Putin briefed Prime Minister on the latest development concerning Ukrainian front. While thanking President Putin for his detailed assessment, Prime Minister Modi reiterated India's consistent position for a peaceful resolution of the conflict. The two leaders also reviewed the progress in bilateral agenda and reaffirmed their commitment to further deepen the special and privileged strategic partnership between India and Russia. Prime Minister Modi also invited President Putin for his India visit later this year and for a 23rd India-Russia annual summit. And on this big story, I'm being joined by Farida Segatolina, RT correspondent from Moscow. Welcome to World Today, Farida. And my first question to you would be, can you tell us that what President Putin and Prime Minister Modi focused on during their telephonic call on today? Any big takeaway? And when can we expect President Putin visiting India?
Yes, well, the phone call just finished a few hours ago between Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Russian President Vladimir Putin. And from what we know, a range of issues were discussed. Narendra Modi thanked President Vladimir Putin for updating him on the latest news from the situation in Ukraine. And also, we heard that Narendra Modi characterized the conversation as a very good and detailed conversation, and even referred to Russian President Vladimir Putin as a friend. Now, the Kremlin did note that the two leaders exchanged views on critical bilateral matters, including cooperation in trade, investment, and the economy. Now, it's also interesting to note that just yesterday, India's National Security Advisor Ajit Doval was also in Moscow and had a meeting with Russian Security Council Chief Sergei Shoigu. And during that meeting, Sergei Shoigu noted that Russia and India are linked by strong, trusting, time-tested bonds of friendship, emphasizing that relations with India are of paramount importance to Moscow. Now, in terms of Russian President Vladimir Putin's visit to India, Ajit Doval did say yesterday that the dates are nearly finalized, and he hinted that it could be towards the end of the year.
Okay, so towards the end of the year, because India and Russia share a established arrangement of having an annual summit every year. But Farida, the phone call happened at a time when President Donald Trump and his deadline about Russia-Ukraine conflict ceasefire is also coming to close today, and Kremlin's announcement regarding a direct meeting between US President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin. President Putin also briefed Prime Minister Modi about Ukraine situation. So, is Russia ready for a ceasefire deal with Ukraine? What are you picking up from Moscow?
Well, Russia has consistently stated its preference for a peaceful resolution to the Ukrainian conflict. However, Russia has also consistently noted that in order for the conflict to have a peaceful resolution, the key root causes of it must be addressed, including the long-standing security concerns that Russia has. And they were even mentioned right before the escalation happened in Ukraine. So since May, there have been mediation talks with Kyiv. And during then, there's been a few rounds of prisoner exchanges as well. And in terms of the meeting with Steve Witkoff on Wednesday, there were no details that were disclosed. However, Washington did come out with a statement saying that progress has been made and the meeting went better than expected, although no specifics were provided. As for the summit between Russia and the US, Kremlin aide Ushakov did note that it could happen as soon as next week. And Russian President Vladimir Putin did suggest the United Arab Emirates as a potential location for the summit.
Thank you very much, Farida, for all these details and putting this big development into context. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And now moving on to another big story, which is having all these three common actors, US, India and Russia, as US slaps additional tariffs on India for buying Russian oil possible meeting between US President Donald Trump and his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin, is on the cards. As Farida was also sharing the details that UAE could be a potential place of meeting between these two leaders. A meeting is likely to be scheduled next week as Kremlin aide confirms of an acceptable deal offered by the United States. A suitable venue for this big meeting is being arranged.
With Donald Trump's deadline for Russia to seal a deal regarding war with Ukraine ends on August 8th, what sanctions would likely to be imposed by the US is unclear. However, Trump has left it to the Russian president's discretion to act accordingly.
Deadline still standing for Vladimir Putin to agree to a ceasefire tomorrow, or is that fluid now?
It's going to be up to him.
And
We're going to see what he has to say. It's going to be up to him. Very disappointed, yeah.
Earlier, US President had proposed a trilateral meet involving Trump, Putin and Zelensky. But later he said it was not a necessary ground for him to meet the Russian president.
Putin have to meet with Zelensky in order and before you and Putin have to meet? Or you hope
No, I don't know. I didn't hear
For you
him.
to meet with him, he doesn't have to agree to meet with Zelensky. Is that what you're saying?
No, he doesn't. No.
Meanwhile, Kremlin is making preparations for a possible meet between Trump and Putin next week. An acceptable deal has also been offered to Moscow.
There was an offer made by the Americans that we consider quite acceptable. That is it.
What will be the venue?
For now, I cannot say this, although the venue has been basically determined.
Meeting will be held next week.
Yes, approximately next week. We are going to work towards it now.
Putin has spoken to Chinese President Xi Jinping over the phone, informing him about the latest on Ukraine and talks with the US. He has also appreciated the constructive role that China has played for the political settlement of the crisis. As a potential meet between the two world leaders is creating ripples across the globe with the hope that the war will end soon, Russia continues to pound Ukraine. Firefighters in Kharkiv extinguished a blaze caused by a Russian drone strike on an office building. Emergency services published video footage showing firefighters putting out flames at the site. With Mahashweta Lala, Bureau Report, India Today.
As India mulls over how to counter the additional tariffs that will go into effect from August 27, US now says the tariff rate increase on India is a pure national security issue. Days before, US President Donald Trump attributed the additional tariffs on India's purchase of Russian oil. The Trump administration has been consistently changing the statements regarding the decision to impose additional tariffs on India. China, meanwhile, is not on the fresh tariff list. There are clear signs of duplicity when it comes to US handling of China and India doing business with Russia.
The Trump administration is busy looking for reasons to back its fresh tariff rate imposed on India. From Trump accusing India of not caring about the number of Ukrainians killed by the Russian war machine and thereby buying oil from Russia, to trade advisor Peter Navarro calling it a pure national security issue. Terming India as Maharaja of tariffs, Navarro said America imports goods from India and then the dollars sent to India are being used to buy Russian oil.
Let's talk first about the India tariffs, which went up to 50% today. It's important to understand that the rationale for the India tariffs are very different from the reciprocal tariffs. This was a pure national security issue associated with India's abject refusal to stop buying Russian oil. And the math of this, every American needs to understand because it's related to the trade situation. You start with the fact that India is the Maharaja of tariffs. It's the highest tariffs in the world, charging on American products, and it's got high non-tariff barriers, so we can't get our products in. So we send a lot of dollars overseas to India to buy their products in an unfair trade environment. India then uses American dollars to buy Russian oil.
On the other hand, when President Trump was asked by a reporter if he expects increased trade negotiations with India after the announcement of 50% tariffs, all that he had to say was, no, not until we get it resolved.
To follow up on the India tariffs, do you expect increased trade negotiations, since you've announced the 50% tariff?
No, not until we get it resolved.
If going by Trump's rationale, India faces additional tariffs because of its purchase of oil from Russia. So from Trump's remark, we decipher that the matter gets resolved once India stops buying Russian oil. Whereas India faces 50% tariffs for doing business with Russia. China, which is US' biggest competitor and one of Russia's strongest ally and business partners, has been spared. When Navarro was asked why China not meted the same treatment, this is what he had to say.
As the boss says, let's see what happens. Keep in mind that we have over 50% tariffs on China already. Okay.
Right, but you could
we
go
have,
higher, but they've been punished for buying
we,
Russian
we
oil.
have
India's
we
been
have
punished for
over 50% tariffs
But
on
not because
China, so we don't
buying
want to get to
Russian
a
oil.
point where we actually hurt ourselves. Okay,
But
so
do you
that
see why people
that
would be
question,
confused by that?
and I think I've given a really good answer to that.
In fact, China does not even find itself mentioned on the new tariff list. Trump, who had earlier attacked China and promised to levy high tariffs, is now negotiating with them. In fact, when asked why he has singled out India for doing business with Russia, while China continues to also do the same, President Trump said more secondary sanctions were coming.
Indian officials have said that there are other countries that are buying Russian oil.
It's okay.
Like China, for instance,
It's
buys
okay.
more.
Yeah.
Why are you singling India out for these additional
It's
sanctions?
only been 8 hours, so let's see what happens over the
More
next.
secondary sanctions
you're going
very
to see a lot
soon.
more.
So this is a taste of
You're
what's
going to
to
see a
come.
lot more. You're going to see so much secondary sanctions.
Again, when Trump was asked during an interaction with reporters that when India is being criticized for buying Russian oil, US imports Russian uranium, chemicals and fertilizers. This is what the President of the United States had to say.
India says that the US imports Russian uranium, chemicals, fertilizers, while criticizing their energy imports. Your response to that, sir?
I don't know anything about it. I'd have to check, but we'll get back to you on that. Yeah, please.
So why this duplicity? And how is India's buying of Russian oil becomes a matter of national security? This is what Trump has now got to answer. With Mahashweta Lala, Bureau Report, India Today.
And now the question remains how India is going to deal with the tariff tyranny imposed by US President Donald Trump. Meanwhile, all eyes were on Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal at the Business Today's India at 100 conclave. The minister claimed Indian exports this year will be more than the previous year. Here are the excerpts from the session.
How do you think we as a nation will deal with this challenge of deglobalization and how the trade order is being completely dismantled? And what do you think is the playbook going to be? How are you going to tackle this, including these penal tariffs on India imposed by the US?
I don't see any deglobalization. I see countries restructuring their trade routes and their trade partners. And I'm quite confident this year India will do more exports than we did last year.
And you already have mitigated, all factors put in place. BRICS becomes stronger?
Well, I think these are questions you should ask the Honorable Foreign Minister. But I can only talk about trade and commerce. India's exports in the current year will be more than they were last year.
So you heard Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal giving a very careful answer and a cautious approach as far as this question is concerned. Meanwhile, I am being joined by India Today's Rohit Sharma from Washington, D.C. to discuss this big story. Rohit, welcome to World Today. And my first question to you would be that with US President Donald Trump indicating on a halt of further talks until so-called dispute is resolved, what are the prospects of upcoming sixth round of negotiation in late August, and how might Prime Minister Narendra Modi's stance on protecting India's farmer influence the outcome?
Well, look, I think, and I said this earlier also this morning on India Today, that I think that question was probably not conveyed properly. I think President was alluding to the fact that he probably heard that if the tariffs go down, if the negotiations continue, the additional tariffs, and he basically said no to that. The talks are continuing, as far as I know. The next rounds of talks will happen. He's obviously given a 3-week deadline, which would be coinciding with the next level of talks. So yes, the talks are happening. Nobody's backed down. There's no pause, as some people in media have suggested. Both the channels are still engaging to get some deal going in the next couple of weeks, and which is what President Trump also wrote in his executive order, to say that he's going to monitor things, and then depending on how things pan out, he might increase or change his mind on these tariffs. So,
but Rohit, did you get
did
you get an official confirmation from the State Department that there is going to be a next round of talks?
Well, we don't have that, Pranay. I mean, we can obviously, but as far as my sources are telling me, there will be, and there are continuing negotiations that are going on as we talk, and that's why we have those.
Because
3 weeks
what we are picking up here is that Indian side is also waiting for a confirmation from the State Department and the USTR's office. Anyway, moving on to another aspect of it, that as US President Donald Trump is likely to meet Russian President Vladimir Putin, and a possible ceasefire deal is also being worked out between Russia and Ukraine. What are the chances of President Trump changing his stand on India and its oil purchase from Russia? What are you picking up from the power corridors of Washington, D.C.?
Look, a lot of people are looking at that and hopeful that if there is a ceasefire and the war could be stopped, automatically those 25% additional tariffs could become a history essentially, and that India would not have to pay that, and they could possibly go back to 25% tariff and then negotiate from that perspective. But look, Pranay, we've seen this. President Trump is definitely not happy with India at this point in time. He's used political opponent in Brazil to slap 50% tariffs on Brazil. So he could find another reason. He's not a fan of BRICS. He could possibly come back and say, look, I'm not happy with BRICS. I'm going to still continue those additional tariffs. So he could find a reason to keep those tariffs on. But the general consensus is that if there is a ceasefire, it does give India.
You're making a big point, Rohit, here. So he may find another reason to penalize India. This is what you want to say?
He might. I mean, and he said it multiple times in the past too, that he's not happy with BRICS. He's not happy how things are shaping up. He's talked about, he's endorsed Central Instagram's idea of 500% of tariffs on BRIC countries. So he might, but yes, if there is a ceasefire, it does give us an off-ramp to negotiate.
So this remains a challenge for India to deal with President Donald Trump and his administration. Thank you very much, Rohit, for all these updates and putting these developments into context. Moving on to another big issue. A 6-year-old Indian origin girl in Waterford City in Ireland was assaulted by a group of boys who punched her and hit her private parts with a bicycle and also hurled racist abuse. The child was playing near her house when a group of boys, reportedly aged between 12 and 14, attacked her while shouting, "Go back to India." According to her mother, the attackers hit her private parts with a bicycle and punched her in the face, leaving her traumatized and in tears. My colleague Geeta Mohan had a detailed conversation with the victim's family. Let's listen in what the family has shared.
Tell us exactly what happened, and why is it the fact that you are all Irish citizens? Why is it that you're seeing an increase in attacks on Indian origin people living in Ireland today?
It was so scary experience at that time because, we were alone at that time and she was playing just in front of our house. So that was a scary. And, Nia wasn't ready to play outside for 2 days. She was so scared and all, yeah. But now she's coming back, trying to play with the friends, that's so positive way, so we are happy with that, but that was a trauma. We are still, living with that trauma as a parent of a 6-year-old and a 10-month-old. That was a scary. But, these kind of things can happen anywhere. But we think the supportive system was in much good here at that time because we informed police about this, but they were not they haven't recorded it, as a case. That was a surprising thing for us. But I think there is a teenage protection law, which is very valuable in Ireland. That is one factor because all these racistic attacks are happening from a group of teenage voice. I think they are well aware that even if something is happening, they won't be, get arrested and they won't be get punished. That's another factor, I think, because these teenage, criminal activities are increasing.
You can watch this detailed conversation on India Today Global. But now, let's change the taste and flavor of the story, because a popular UK website, Good Food, sparked outrage in Italy after publishing a recipe of the classic Roman dish cacio e pepe, but with incorrect ingredients. The error drew strong criticism, prompting an Italian restaurant association to demand formal correction and even involved the British Embassy in Rome. Here is a report.
We all love enjoying pasta, whether it's with friends, family, or someone special. But imagine a full-blown controversy erupting over pasta ingredients. That is exactly what has happened after one of the United Kingdom's most popular food websites stirred up debate with its version of a classic pasta dish. Italians were outraged after the popular UK-based Good Food website published a recipe for the traditional Roman dish cacio e pepe, but with the wrong ingredients and a casual tone that made it seem like just another quick meal. The recipe suggested using 4 simple ingredients: spaghetti, black pepper, parmesan and butter. But Italians insist the authentic version includes only 3 elements: tonarelli pasta, black pepper and pecorino romano cheese, no butter and definitely no parmesan. An Italian restaurant association has formally demanded a correction to safeguard the authenticity of this iconic dish. They have even raised the issue with the British Embassy in Rome. Interestingly, the recipe has been online for months, and although a few readers had pointed out the butter mistake, it is only now that it seems to have drawn real attention. With Neha Kumari, Bureau Report, India Today.